So I looked at some of the issues in security for the Internet of Things today and some of the things that could be done to fix it. Here's a quick agenda of things I'll run through. Just a quick summary of the Internet of Things. I'm sure all of you know about it, but just in case. We're going to look at some of the major issues. Then we're going to look at how you go about securing the Internet of Things. I looked at a secure protocol. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then a conclusion. Okay, so applications of the Internet of I'm assuming all of you know what the Internet of Things is, so I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to jump straight away into the applications. One of the biggest ones is home and safety, and that ties into the connected home that Guy just talked about. And that includes connecting your home appliances, your kitchen, lighting, heating, your AC, safety monitoring, which is becoming pretty big, especially with applications like Time Warner's Intelligent Home, which has video cameras and so on. Another application is health and fitness, and that would be your Fitbits, your Nike Fuel Band, and other stuff that keeps coming up for monitoring your health and fitness. The third one is transportation. This one's pretty cool. It's so it includes things like smart parking, smart traffic signals that know when traffic is approaching and can change based on, I guess, flow of traffic. It also involves streamlining operations at major hubs, airports, ports, roadways, railways, and also fleet management services, so knowing where your taxi cabs are or whatever. Or your rental cars, I guess. And the last one, which is pretty major but not really talked about much, is industrial. And that involves having your machines connected to each other to know, for instance, if the line has come to a halt, then to shut down certain machines so that you're not wasting electricity, oil and gas flowing through the pipelines. If there's any interruptions, then it will stop further down the pipeline so there's no oil spurting out. And also cost control. So these are some of the applications, and each one has its own challenges for security. I like this picture. So one is from the consumer standpoint, there's data about your usage in your connected home. So if someone can get access to that information, they know when you're leaving home, when you're coming back, and of course if they want to break in, they know exactly when to do it. There's also the whole video feed issue that we talked about, which is a huge security concern. Also, if your locks are connected to the internet, they can obviously be disengaged, and the person doesn't actually need to break in. Also, a major concern is the proliferating number of endpoints. There's so many sensors, cheap sensors, that are being distributed out into the world, and not all of them are equipped with the right security measures, so it's getting harder and harder to keep track of them and to control them. Another issue is if someone attacks home systems, they can spike electricity and then bring down a whole electric grid, which is a pretty major thing but hasn't really been looked at yet. Not in my research. I didn't find much information around a lot of ways to control this. Also another thing I talked about was the oil and gas flow, and someone can hack the remote sensors and oil fields and bring the flow of oil and gas to a halt, and commercial espionage is another one. So devices connected to IoT are not very secure, and here's why. So one is, of course, the huge number of endpoints that I talked about, but also the fact that they're typically very low energy devices, so they don't have the ability to actually store information, or they also don't have the amount of energy required to negotiate a handshake protocol. So they're also typically not encrypted, at least the older ones are not. Also, very few countries have regulations around internet compatible devices, so that's another issue. And a big one is that ease of use is obviously preferred. That's why we love the Internet of Things so much, that it's easy to use. You don't have to enter your password 50 times during the day, and obviously that can create some issues. And the last one is there isn't a whole lot being done in terms of identity or permissions management in the Internet of Things right now. So that's the reason they're not very secure. But here are some ways you can try to secure them. One is just threat intelligence, so keeping an eye on the attack patterns throughout the world and knowing what might happen and using that information to kind of set up some kind of security around your network, if not the actual devices. Another one is business integration, so keeping in mind how you want to grow your Internet of Things and not just going like crazy with all the devices just because it's cool, but actually making sure that it's in line with your strategy. There's device management, obviously, so keeping track of the devices, of course, but also making sure that there's some way of device authentication, but also revocation built in. So revocation is like totally not done today. There's also vendor management, so making sure you only purchase from trusted vendors and not having random people on the street making their own IoT devices. And the last one is application security measures, which is building in secure handshakes into the connection protocol, but also just being mindful of the fact that if it's about somebody's home security, you may not want to just have it be, oh, I'm within 5 feet of the house, so let all the locks open up. I mean, I don't think that happens, but like the application developers need to keep in mind that that's not how far they go in taking ease of use to the extreme. So then I looked at a secure network protocol. It's called Zigbee. This is actually the one that's being used by iControl and Time Warner Cable's Intelligent Home, and they're the guys who came here for the Connected Home event back in winter. It's an alliance between all these major companies that are entrants in the Internet of Things space, and some of them are. So, for instance, Schneider Electric is actually huge in industrial Internet of Things. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of companies in there. So Zigbee has actually taken some steps to secure the Internet of Things. For instance, they have built-in AES 128 encryption into their devices and or into their protocol. They are also server-driven, which is huge because one threat to information is that you put personal information in the sensors, and then the sensors, if the sensors get stolen because they're tiny, then all your information's out there in the world. But they've made sure that it's server-driven. There's also, I think I talked through most of this. They do follow regional regulatory compliance, but that's only for healthcare apps right now. They do support device authentication. What they do not support is revocation of access. So that is obviously a major concern. So conclusion. Sorry, this was a quick one. So security is still in its infancy, but it is a major concern, and more companies are looking into it. Zigbee has taken a step in the right direction, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So device authentication and access management is obviously a big issue, and you know, this stuff out there that is going to ramp it up, but the major takeaway for me was that the action needs to be taken now, before there's too many sensors and endpoints released out into the world, and there's no way of like backward compatibility for them. So whatever needs to be done needs to happen now, and there's companies that are doing it. Questions? Yes.
You see this as something that government may have been involved in at some point?
So, I mean, they can try to do it, but unless there's like control over all of these things that I talked about, so even if the government's involved, like if there's vendors out there that are still releasing devices that people are purchasing, and the thing about the internet is it spans so many countries, like, I mean, I'm guessing you could technically have, I don't know if it's actually been done in industries, but say your factory in France is connected to your factory in the US, and the US government may have regulations, but if the France government doesn't have them, then that's not really going to work. So unless the whole world works together, I don't see that as a very effective way. It really needs to come from the vendors, like all the vendors, the application developers, and so on, device manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's, I hope everybody's getting, I mean, it's amazing how on topic, not on topic, but what's going on in the real world now, these things you're facing. So, for example, there was an article this morning about how most most people don't carry more than $50 of cash anymore. And in fact, the growth of people who don't carry any cash at all is growing astronomically to get to the mobile payments. And then most of you have heard that the U.S. is supposed to be trying to go after Chinese officials for cyber terrorism, or at least what they call cyber attacks. I shouldn't say cyber terrorism, the cyber attacks. And part of that connects to this with, it's, you know, you talked about if government can't do it, how do you think the companies themselves are going to be able to get together in order to do this?
So I think a critical factor in that is the protocol they use. So if so I guess in my mind it all comes down to standardization. Okay. They all need to either be on the same standard, or all the protocols they're using need to follow the same standards for having minimum this level of this level of encryption. They all must be server driven. Like, I think it comes down to the protocol they're using, and right now, like, Zigbee is huge. Right. Obviously, we cannot force everyone to use it. AllJoin is another one that's also being used. If there's like a body that's formed, like this is but like this alliance is huge. I mean, these are some really major companies, and if somehow like between Zigbee and AllJoin and whatever other protocols there are, if we can get, I would say, like 90% of the companies to be aligned with this, then they can like set the standards for these are the standards and we're going to stick to them, and any new entrants can then, they're kind of forced to follow these just because these are the only protocols out there. So in my mind, that's where it all hinges, protocol being used.
I was just going to ask, did you look at the security? So ZWave, I know, is the other one that's really kind of big with Zigbee, and a lot of some of the companies that came here were saying that, oh, we think ZWave is kind of more where it's going to go.
Right.
I've looked at both of those, but not from a security perspective. I don't know if have they done kind of what Zigbee's doing as well, or are they any better or worse?
I didn't look into it closely, as in like I know they're secure, but I didn't look into like what level of encryption and so on. Zigbee was the one I focused on.
So last week I interviewed Chris Resendez, and I had the same question for him, like which standard do you think will prevail in the near future? And he said like whatever standard it is, innovation is going to drive the adoption of standards. So you can create alliances, but if these companies are working and pumping in more money into R&D to make the standards more user friendly, that's going to drive the standardization. I mean, you cannot like keep asking other companies to like come on board, but if you really spend more and get the standards to be good enough, everyone will jump.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.